I generally don't like electronic sounds that much, which you might find surprising since I always work with them. But I find natural sound, or sound produced from non-electronic sources, to be so rich and so interesting. And yet the interesting thing about electronic sound is that it's very easy to manipulate. So the synthesizer seemed to me to present you with a position where you could turn natural sound into electronic sound and use some of the freedoms that the synthesizer then allowed you. So most of the time in Roxy, that's what I was doing. I was rarely using it as a sound source. And most of the time now, that's what I still do. But now, instead of just using the synthesizer, I use the whole studio as an appendage to the instrument in that way. As regards the synthesizer, there was always an ambiguity about where the sound actually came from. You know, people always used to say after concerts, I don't know what you were doing, but I think I liked it. Because since I was treating instruments that were already playing on stage, it was quite difficult to assess my contribution to the sound. You know, I was just sometimes accentuating some quality that already existed in the instruments on stage. Again, production was something that you could approach in two different ways. You could either say that the role of a producer is to make the most accurate possible record of a performance, or the role of a producer is to use the studio as an instrument which somehow bound together and made the best of the instruments that were given in the performance. And if this meant completely destroying the raw material and building something new out of its ashes kind of thing, I was prepared to do that as well.
I mean, I think the producer...
In fact, I did an interview with an American magazine called Contemporary Keyboard, and one of the questions they asked me was what would I consider was the direction that synthesizers should be developing in. And I think they assumed that I would be talking about computer graphics and light pens and all that sort of thing. And I said I thought it would be interesting if two types of development happened. One would be towards synthesizers that were very much simpler, so that produced maybe 20 nice sounds. Well, subsequently the Casio keyboard came out like that. And the other would be towards synthesizers that were definitely physically related to you, so that it would make a difference if you pressed harder as you turned the knob, or if you were getting excited in some way, you know. One of the problems with synthesizers is that, except on the very, very large ones, your physical condition doesn't communicate in the sound. It does on a violin, for example. It does on an electric guitar. It does on most acoustic instruments. So I think those two directions would be interesting. One towards actually more simple synthesizers, and the other towards more physical synthesizers.
I think good ideas.
It isn't the instrument that's going to give you the answer. It's never the instrument that gives you the answer. The answer always comes from you somewhere, and the instrument is a way of then externalizing that. But the illusion with the big synthesizers is that somewhere among all those wires is the thing that's going to save the day for you. And it's never true. I guess the tape recorder leading into the synthesizer, those were the only instruments that really fascinated me, because I felt that with those it was possible to use all other instruments in an interesting way. Of course, not in the same way as a virtuoso would use them, but one could find a use for other instruments, and one could manipulate them to make an interesting form of music just by using those machines, which I felt were extremely simple to use. The first real synthesizer I played with was when I joined Roxy Music. Andy Mackay had one, and I still have I don't have exactly the same one, but I have the same model today. I came along originally just to make recordings of the group. When I saw the synthesizer, I naturally started playing around with that as well. And so I became, almost imperceptibly, became the synthesizer player.